Truly, truly. And we are Facebook Live in right now, man. A little brief, quote unquote, brief little chat here with former Baltimore cop Michael A. Wood Jr., who is stopping by to do a little brief chat on what just recently happened in Oklahoma. Terrence, I don't want to massacre his last name, Kruthcher, Terrence Kruthcher, who was shot by an officer last night. I had Michael Wood. I saw him on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I had him on another podcast that I do with UFC Hall of Famer Pat Miletich, and we kind of talked a little bit broader on lost my connection here. Anyway, I'm still recording. Broader conversation on the Second Amendment and police kind of at large. And you, obviously being a former cop, you carry a lot of weight with what you're talking about, and it still fucks with me today, honestly. As a kid, we all kind of have our thoughts on racism and the police and corruption and kind of seeing it from the outside. But your illustration, your articulation of, and we mentioned it the other day, as a Baltimore cop, there was a kind of a social engineering standpoint to it, where they kind of herded a certain group of people into a certain area, referred to this area over the course of decades as the zoo, and the police as the zookeepers, and it just really hit me, man. And that really doesn't have much to do specifically with what we're going to be talking about, but there is a larger context to this that you spoke about very articulately. As a former cop, former Marine, what the fuck, what did you see? What happened yesterday in your mind? Michael, how are you, by the way?
Good. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you having this conversation again.
Absolutely.
I'm just at a loss again, where you look at it. I was talking to Sean King this morning, and he wanted me to look at something about the shooting, and it's just like, what more do we have to look at? I don't understand. We have this standard where Philando Castile was comply and die, and there's a lot of comply and die. This comply and you will live thing is also a fallacy. So we're in this state where we have a legal standard that all an officer needs to do is be afraid and they can kill. And then we have a culture that has what you were saying, the zoo and the zookeeper idea in rural America, and you have this force and this like a nationalistic praising of police officers heroes no matter what. And it's just putting us in this situation that's brutally obvious that certain elements of policing and the system result in the execution of people, state sanctioned, without any repercussion, any checks and balance, any even best practice effort to say, hey, this is clearly wrong. Let's acknowledge this is wrong and figure out how to ensure that it never happens again. Instead, the answer is, well, then you should be listening. But we are demonstrably at a state where listening also doesn't matter.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was thinking earlier, it's almost kind of like this election. It's like this binary choice. If you err on the side of the criminal, then you automatically think, they're justified all the time. The cops aren't justified every time. Or if you are on the side of the cop, then you automatically think every shooting is justified. And it's definitely not that way. But it starts to become a pattern where it becomes like, again, I am jumping the gun on having Michael on right now. There's been no real hearing or anything. We just am going off the ground level video of this gentleman, and then we had the aerial video. And that's another thing I wanted to speak to you about, sir, Michael. the guy in the helicopter, and this for me was just indicative of the social engineering. He saw this guy, and I don't know if you heard this, the audio. He was like, "Well, he looks like a bad man," and then he was like, "Hey, he looks like he's on something." The guy was coming from music appreciation class, community college class, 40-year-old guy, father of four, hearing this cop from above have his characterization, which was just so off. What do you think about that part of it?
Well, that's the thing. So this is exactly what we're saying, right? So if what I've been saying and if what the black community has been saying, and not just black, I understand it's a bigger problem, but if we narrow it down to that, we can isolate it and talk about it. So if you listen to me and them, I've been telling you this for a year and a half. They've been telling you this for a good 50, 100 years. And we see it now because there's evidence, and it's still like this denial that it's not taking place. If this stuff's not on video, then you know what happened.
What is that?
So
what is that?
Continue to deny. I don't know. I am utterly baffled. So I literally thought to myself, I said, this is good. We have the videos, so then the cops will at least say to themselves, well, I don't want to be on video, so that will have some kind of check. But that doesn't seem to be the case. It actually seems to be the reverse, which is why we have to be so careful with our social concepts and what we think will work in policing, because sometimes these ideas that just seem common sense are the exact opposite when they're applied.
Well, and as this popped off last night, I hopped on. I got home a little late, and I was chopping it up with you on Twitter. And I just, your opinion for me, I definitely value your opinion. Like I said, you've been in the trenches, so you definitely have a lot of good information as it relates to this. What are your thoughts on, there was a tasing, then the shooting, and I talked to you, and you said sympathetic, and I didn't know what that one word meant. And there's something called a sympathetic shooting. Can you kind of explain to the lay person out there what a sympathetic shooting is as far as police training or police lingo goes?
Sure. And the overall encompassing idea to pretty much this entire problem is look at fear. So you got to put yourself in the mindset that this officer is scared. So what happens is they're in a situation, they don't have confidence in what they're doing, they don't know what's going on, and another officer shoots. But because that officer shoots, it causes this reaction just in human beings that are afraid to also engage that threat or presumed threat. I mean, see, I even did that with my slip of words. It's not a threat. So just because somebody shoots, you have to know what's going on first.
Well, if she was following suit, why did she pull the heat? Why didn't she pull the taser like she was following suit on the other officer? I'm not asking you to speak for her, but just hypothesizing.
No. You can. I don't know why that would be. I would imagine that that's also fear-based. But my problem, which I was articulating to you on Twitter, is that that's also proper technique. So if I would want somebody to have a taser and a handgun, two officers to engage, if a taser is to be used at all. And that is because in the original philosophy and the one that I still maintain is that it is a less lethal weapon, not a non-lethal weapon. So it can only be used in deadly force situations in lieu of the firearm. So you would be using the taser and you would need the handgun because you're in a situation where you could use the handgun legally, but yet you're choosing the less lethal alternative because that's the better thing to do, but you need that firearm there because you shouldn't be in a situation that doesn't need the firearm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay, yeah, so if the taser's out, that means the firearm should be out, or if the firearm's out, that means the taser should be out. These things should go together.
A little bit of redundancy, a bit.
Right, because the officer that has the taser is now vulnerable.
Sure. Well, and this, again, man, going... I think
she's afraid. I think she's afraid. I mean, it's clear that she's afraid. So when that she's already afraid.
Do we know her age? How old is she? How old is she?
I don't know, but she looked late 20s at best.
Okay.
You pull so she's in this situation. She's scared. She doesn't know what's going on. She's already intimidated. The world has told her that this big black man is scary and a threat. I mean, even that message got to the helicopter magically. So when she's afraid and that taser goes off, it goes boom, bing. They just react. It's the fear is pop, 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 pop.
Yeah.
Because that's just what's there.
Just the level of conditioning, if you will. I
don't know if it's a conditioning because no one's taught this in an actual tactic.
Well, the conditioning as far as the fear. Where'd that fear come from? That had to come.
Yeah, that's societal and that's cultural in the department. Like you're not taught those kind of tactics. That's what overwhelms everything. Because we have that culture. American policing comes from catching slaves, protecting white property, and oppressing Aboriginal people. And we are doing that today, right now. Nothing has changed, and we're asking why the police operate in the same fashion. Like they don't have to be conscious of it. It's the way the culture and society creates them. Police are a microcosm of the rest of us because of the power and the amount of interaction.
So, again, I'm going to ask you to hypothesize. You're a smart dude. So, 2 weeks ago, and again, not to get whatever, we're talking about it, so I guess it's sort of relevant. Colin Kaepernick makes his move, and the Internet sort of explodes on both sides, if you will. One side justifying, one side calling him a, N-bomb and drop it, just call him a piece of shit. And then this has happened over the last kind of 48 hours, and I'm just it's been kind of inconspicuous, the silence as far as, I don't know. It's not it's like kind of one side everywhere. Like on one side it's like, hey, see here again, and the other side like more Kaepernick videos or more Kaepernick memes. It's like, why the obtuseness? Why so thick-skulledness? What's going on? Why can't they just see what's absolutely happening? I mean, obviously there's some like cultural. I mean, I get it from the society or sociological, cultural, anthropological. We're all products of our own environment, but it's like we're literally seeing some blatant shit happen in front of our face, and people can still seemingly justify it. I mean, again, I guess I'm jumping the gun still. There's been no trial, but it looks pretty cut and dry to me here. The guy had his hands up.
Well, I mean, so people do this. This is what human beings do. We have a bias. So even if it's like a religion, I like to use religion a lot because I'm an atheist and it's an easy thing for people to look at because I can say atheist and a good listening portion of the audience will kind of cringe when I say that. And that's just a null position. What makes that so offensive is that what I am telling you is that you and your parents and your parents' parents and the society that you grew up in was wrong. So America grew up in this thing where the black people listen, white power, they do the menial jobs, we do the big time jobs. And as that collapses, then we come back to where we were. So you see tensions where economic things don't show up for the lower end of the portion. For the majority, this is why you have ISIS. ISIS exists because of lack of resources, just like gangs exist in America from lack of resources. We like to get caught up in a lot of the ancillary things regarding to it. So if you have a country that largely and rightly feels as though they are getting less and less, then they get defensive and they're misapplying who that defensiveness gets put out on. They punch down. And if ever you feel oppressed, punching down is the last thing you should be doing. You got to be punching up. That's who's oppressing you.
Well, and again, when I've spoke about even this kind of larger global context, like we'll never have really good solutions as long as our premises are off, and we'll never really start solving these problems until, excuse me. And again, this isn't a police bashing conversation at all, but again, it seems like there's some fairly blatant things going on. We're having some pretty prominent people try to bring attention to a lot of these things going on, and then it just turns into this, like, I don't know, again, obtuseness. There's just this blind eye of kind of what's going on. I don't, again, I guess I understand it. It's just unfortunate because, I don't know, it seems to me pretty blatant. And again, like last night from what I saw, like you said, even obeying you can be shot. It's pretty startling, man.
Yeah, and I've been having this conversation a lot. It's what turned me off the Twitter today, in that in this environment, because so many people are affected by police, we now have this thing where everybody thinks they know what's going on. And we've gotten to this point where everybody's 2 cents are being listened to, and that means that all the objectors get to pick at misinformation that's spread because everybody is being listened to for their 2 cents. And it's great to listen to people, but that has to be filtered through some sort of truth regulation. That's our problem with Trump, right? He says anything and no one stops and fact checks. We have a big problem with that in police reform right now, where everyone's given their opinions and we have no fact checking going on. And so the example here is that people will think that if these cops are charged and they're sent to jail for life, that something has been done. And nothing in that case has been done to prevent the next man from dying. So you don't achieve anything. The point of imprisonment is to protect the rest of society. It is not to punish the individual and get vengeance. That is a morally corrupt position that we have developed.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, so I mean, part of your solution, I mean, I see you've gone to try to, reform police, as a progressive, really trying to go having a different approach to policing. Obviously, there's no silver bullet. What are some of your solutions? I said last night, I don't think this is going to get worse before it gets better. And you had kind of mentioned it almost kind of has to, where I don't know. What do you see as some kind of solution to policing, if you will? Because I sat at a bar one time, and there was a party going on with cops. I'm not going to mention the department, and they sat there and got fucking hammered. And there was this few guys off to the side that were just pounding whiskey, and I just heard them. They were just, so one dude walked away, and he was like, "Hey man, I thought Dennis was in the inner circle," and the other guy's like, "Fuck no, he's not in the inner circle, and he'll never be in the inner circle, and here's why." Blah 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 blah. And that inner circle is the kind of shit, department by department. It's not everyone, and I'm not generalizing, that watches each other's ass. You know what I mean? That does the perjurious testimony or plant guns or does things to just kind of cover each other's ass. And I know people don't think that's possible, but that totally exists. And that's kind of like we got to at least acknowledge that there's some bad seeds out there, man, with a lot of power.
Well, I mean, they just proved that in New York, where they recorded themselves setting up the activists. But I'm sure everybody says Black Lives Matter activists don't get set up. But anyway, that's another thing that's an empirical flaw. But when you say like these, I'm bringing a new thing, I'm so not bringing a new thing. If I bring anything, it's the experience of actually doing the job and the ability to articulate the big picture. These underlying ideas are nothing new. Cesar Baccaria is the earliest version of this I've only haphazardly tried to find, and that's in 1700s in Italy. He lays out policing principles that are a lot of the foundational things that I still talk about, which is things like a crime that doesn't have a victim in the community cannot be a crime. That breaks down society. That's prohibition right there. 1700s. Nothing new I'm talking about. He's saying you can't do prohibition of victimless crime. So you have the other things that he talks about is that whenever a man is held by the police without any due process, then he is being treated by the state as no longer a man, and thus has no responsibility to adhere to society's rules if we're going to treat people like that. Like all these kind of things, these dudes were talking about in the 18th century. Management principles that I talk about. So my ultimate solution is civilian-led policing, which means the easiest way to sum this up is we like to think that police protect and serve, and they rightly think that they're protecting and serving. But the problem is that who they protect and serve is not even identified in their structure and in what they is in their wording. So who they ended up serving is who has the power. That's command staff, that's your mayor, and that's your city council at the biggest group of people you can possibly think of. That's the biggest group of people, the oligarchy that's controlling your policing.
Get their little fiefdom. They have their little fiefdoms together, yeah.
So police have to serve the people that they're actually serving. I mean, this doesn't make any sense at all the way we're currently structured to serve the few as an enforcement wing of an occupying force. It's set up literally like a tyranny structure because the police are not guided at all by the people they're supposed to be serving. So it's like walking into McDonald's and seeing nothing but chicken teriyaki. And you're like, I'm at McDonald's, I totally want a hamburger. And they're like, well, we've decided that chicken teriyaki is best for you, so eat the chicken teriyaki. That is literally our structure in policing. You must have a structure where the person goes in and says, I want a hamburger, and they go, yeah, you're at McDonald's, here's your hamburger. That must exist. So the way we do that is putting civilians on the very top of the agency in a CEO to board type relationship. So again, this is nothing new. All this is a stakeholder theory in business, and you're applying it to the world.
So what do you think about the sociological impact right now? Where, like I said something to you about last night, the federalization police. We see that happening. We even talked about in our conversation, the MRAPs. And I don't know if you're, are into it. I know you're not necessarily a conspiracy guy, but there's this information out there about George Soros, not necessarily dissing this for me is not dissing the organic understanding of what Black Lives Matter represents, but he's taking that organization and kind of radicalizing it to create this almost radicalization of that movement to exacerbate the us versus them. And that's just one part, black versus white, U.S. versus Muslim, but U.S. versus immigrant. What are your thoughts on that by design creating problems and bringing in more police and federalization?
So when we started this conversation earlier, I alluded to something. I think Jimmy Dore was the first person I heard say it. And that's when you find yourself punching down, rest assured you're being manipulated by somebody above you. So what you just described was a bunch of people punching down have the control of people that are above them. Yeah, that's what we do.
George Soros is punching down?
Any of them, any of the power structures. So media is a power structure, right? Mm-hmm. So in media, you constantly see Black Lives Matter being painted in a way that couldn't be further from the truth of what a Black Lives Matter protest is like. So you're being fed this information, and that's what people absorb, and that's what they see. So then they get manipulated to fight against one another. There's a dude called Trey Crowder who's a liberal redneck, and he does this skit on YouTube where he talks about, like, when in the hell did the rednecks start liking the police? And they only started liking the police when the cops were going after black people, right? So why did they suddenly start to like being like the cops? Well, obviously it's because they're also enacting the racism. So we're even getting manipulated on teams that should be on the same side. Poor people in West Virginia should be marching right along with Black Lives Matter, because if we care about Black Lives Matter, the poor people in West Virginia will be lifted up as well. Primary example of that everybody understands is the Civil Rights Act failed to include certain limitations when they were giving rights to blacks, and that also meant that women got the right to vote because Black Lives Matter.
Very interesting. Yeah, see, and I'm not going to keep you too long. I'm trying to keep you on a half hour, but yeah,
it's okay. It's okay.
No. I truly am. No, it's so very fascinating, man. Like I said, I don't really have all the answers. All too many more questions than answers. That's why I have people obviously smarter than you on to help kind of break through this and misinformation, because there is so much of it out there. I don't know, man. I do think, obviously, and this is just my humble opinion, I think they are trying to pit all of us kind of against each other on all the different kind of sociological strata, economic strata. And again, I don't know. I have a bad feeling that something's coming down the line that they need, this federalization of police. Hopefully that's not the case, but situations like
I don't know. I don't have an argument against federal. I would love federal police. So you got to think about what that even would mean. Like, so it depends how that's defined.
Well, I definitely,
right.
I have a little, like I said, I'm a little apolitical, and I definitely think, government needs to stay in their lane when it comes to certain things. And I think we need a little bit more good localization of our police. I think we need a little bit less, mandates from the federal government, because I think there's just so much larger shit that it gets into, like the commercialization of the prison system, and I don't know. I think it just gets too big and too scary. I just don't trust the Fed so much. But
certainly logic there. But I could make a good case for a federal force, but I think your logic there supports my civilian-led local model, so I'm going to go with your logic.
Yeah, it's just saying you need to take yourself to like a nice small town, like be the chief of police in like Potawatomi, Iowa, dude, and just start it over, man. Just start the whole new model over again. So
that's pretty much what is intended. Yeah.
Awesome. Like I said, I'd be more than happy to move to that town, my man. So long term, not necessarily long term. What do you think is going to come out of this? What do you think is going to? Because I think what they're saying now, this guy went for a gun in his car, like you said last night, and I'm seeing close-up pictures. The window was closed on the vehicle. What do you think they're going to do? What's going to happen here? No charges. She's already on paid administrative leave, which is kind of default mode in these cases.
Paid administrative leave, that's nothing to get caught up on. You have to have procedures in place that cover everything. Like, that's another one of the things that people do get caught up on. It's like, calm down. It has
but
to be
this just kind of lends itself to the Kaepernick thing, like, cops are getting paid to go home and kill black people.
Right.
So it's just,
Right, but we wouldn't care if they got paid for 3 months and then went to court and got in prison. So that's not really the problem.
Right. Okay.
So I think the odds of her conviction are close to zero. Because of that fear standard. That's what I'm telling you. The case law is...
I heard they got bad stuff in Oklahoma. They got it pretty bad, cops shooting people in Oklahoma. It's, I think, like third highest in the country or something like that.
But I mean, I don't even know what to make of all that. I really have to break down why certain areas were higher than other areas.
That's true.
It's a national law. The fear is a national law. So that's case law that covers the entire land, that all an officer has to do is be afraid. And even when I was working, I thought to myself, man, So this is a little unfair, like, in policing world, like that a female that's 90 pounds and is 4'11", like, I'm like, damn, she could pretty much shoot anybody and get away with it. Like, no jury is going to not think that a 4'11", 95-pound female wasn't afraid of a 6 foot. I'm not even using this guy as an example, but of a 6'3", 230 pound. Even if it's a white guy, they're not going to buy that she's not justifiably afraid. So this standard is going to continue to prevent any form of justice in the shape of court case.
Hopefully the mitigating circumstance, or if that's the right term, is the cameras, the body cameras, the ubiquitous cameras everywhere. Hopefully that begins to, because I mean, when you hear people talk about this,
fear
like
overwhelmed. Fear overwhelmed, Sal. Fear overwhelmed by the law. So you can have it as clear as day.
That's what I'm scared. That's what I'm fearing, man. Seriously. That's what we're seeing.
The case. There's nothing to fear. That is the case. If you have fear, you get away with it. I don't care what the evidence is.
Have you seen? Have you seen the documentary Birth of a Nation?
No, but I keep it told to. But there's been all the controversy.
Well, it's based off of D.W. Griffin's film Birth of a Nation. It is Birth of a, but it's based off a book called The Klansman. Dude, check it out, man. You talk about the background of this, like, fear of the black. It's Woodrow Wilson's favorite movie, and you had white guys running around in blackface trying to rape white women, and they had a special screening at the White House, and a whole bunch of people got lynched in Atlanta because people were so pissed. It's just part of this. There was a lot more to it, but yeah, it's very interesting, very interesting.
On the bright side, I don't see that happening.
What's that?
I think we're going to win. I don't think there's going to be a race war. I know this is intuition, but it's the dying throes of that bullshit racist, homophobic, bigotry crowd that the 45 and unders aren't down with, and we're standing up for a large part. When you see who's voting for Bernie, this massive progressive movement is like 90% of people below 25 are these dramatic progressives and essentially socialists. I barely hesitate to call myself a socialist. So this is over. It's just time. And I don't think they're ballsy enough or dedicated enough or really care that much to pick up physical arms or to take to the streets themselves. Every time I've been to a KKK rally, there's like 4 people there, and there's like 500 of us. It's like, well, this is kind of dumb.
Well, that was part of a conversation I had with Pat when I went back home and we had dinner. I'm like, I got a little bit of an issue with the Patriot movement. I'm like, their founding fathers that they lament went to war over taxes, and we're seeing, like, in my opinion, domestic and foreign leaders being assassinated, rigged elections domestically and foreign-wise, wars being started over foreign bullshit. Whatever word you want to call it, tyranny or whatever, like, we've pretty much seen, shit's gone down worse than what the founding fathers are talking about. So I'm like, what are you guys waiting for? You guys going to run in the woods and just keep freaking stockpiling shit and keep talking shit? Because that's essentially what's happening. They're definitely not putting their money where their mouth is, because in my opinion, the government went rogue a while ago.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. We have a corrupt system. Everything, you're right. Everything, all the oppression they're saying is there, but they're actually fighting for that oppression. They're saying, Colin Kaepernick, why don't you submit to the oppression because you don't love this place or you're disrespecting our veterans?
Yeah, that was the other thing I talked to Pat about. The Patriots have way more in common with that than they realize, but it's just like, that's why as Pat, or just generally people, why the inanimate object you're going to trip off of, but you're going to kind of foo-foo the rights that inanimate object is supposed to symbolize. Like, that's essentially what Kaepernick did, exercised his First Amendment right. We don't have to agree with them, but it's just like, come on, man, let's grow up a little bit.
Even beyond the right, though, is that he is in a null position. So everyone in society is saying that we must be obedient and stand. So he didn't take an action. He just failed to take your accepted action of what that you should do because the authoritarian, the tyrannical government tells you to do. He is acting like a revolutionary throwing tea off the boat. That act is so much more American than anyone that criticizes him. As soon as you criticize him, I think you're doing the most un-American thing possible. That is a revolutionary. That is standing up against oppression.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, that's,
it baffles me.
It does.
And they tell me how I feel. I'm insulted. I'm like, I'm the vet, and you're telling me, who didn't serve anything, what I should care about and why I serve, you don't get to tell me that.
Yeah, people tend to get a little bit selectively butthurt on shit, and that's the other thing I kind of talked about. They do it from the standpoint of really misinformation and disinformation because, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, the government's gone rogue a while ago, and we can get into a myriad of ways. This is a great country, don't get me wrong, and I've said this many times, but we got to grow up and at least, like I said, our solution will always be wrong if our premise, if we don't get what's going on. We have to at least be honest about some of the shit that's going on and the actions, what happened the other day. I'd be anxious to see how this conversation evolves. On comment sections on YouTube, it's just in-bomb. He would be alive if he had just, another in-bomb dead. It's just like, all right, well, we got some work to do.
Yeah, but I mean, so we always have to be careful because is that really what they think, or is that just like their facade?
Right.
It's so hard to take people for their actual words. I really love to just focus on their actions.
I agree.
And so their actions are to just go along with the government, side with authority, and not actually take any effort themselves. So I don't think we should ever think that there's any reason why they're going to up and take effort for themselves. So you'll have the same thing. You're going to have the biggest threat. So I know we get perspective. We haven't talked, but in my application for Chicago, they wanted me to talk about terrorism, and maybe one reason why I didn't get the job is I pretty much told them I don't know what you're talking about terroristic threats from Syria in Chicago. The odds of Chicago being subjected to a terroristic threat and the extent of what that would be to the community is statistically irrelevant. You are 50 times more likely to be attacked by a white radical Christian. That's just reality. But you want me to talk about how I'm going to police to protect against ISIS in Chicago. I'm not. It's not a thing.
Well, I'm definitely not going to keep it because that's a whole other conversation. Because in my mind, I think there is a larger thing at play of utilizing basically Islamic terrorism and Islamic fundamentalism as a destabilizing force throughout the world. Like this has happened throughout the world and continues throughout the world. And I think they're just kind of doing that to kind of shuffle the map a little bit, do some regime changes. Wait. I got to stop you.
Nope. Are you seriously talking like they are somewhat comparable to colonization when it comes to world disruption?
No, God no. I know,
but we're sitting in the land. Like, we almost have no right to even say. It's a world economy. You know what I mean? Just saying, like, their threat is so small. From a global context, we remain a much bigger threat. We are the ones that are bombing weddings with drones. Like, I don't find that to be an actual. I don't want to push my card on you like an attack.
No.
I'm just saying that what you're saying is accurate. It's just so statistically small compared to the actual threat.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think it's being exacerbated through the media. But I think it becomes a problem reaction solution. They take this small force, go over and do what they want to do in Germany or Belgium and France, make it seem like this all-encompassing threat, freak people the fuck out, and then essentially create more, global police, your NATOs, your EUs, I don't know. I think
almost COINTELPRO-ish when you put it that way, isn't
That's what it is. It's called Gladio B. I mean, I don't know if you know who Sibel Edmonds is, former FBI whistleblower. I mean, she's very, you should check her out, man. I'll send you some of her stuff. Very articulate and very all-encompassing as far as this kind of global chess game, as far as utilizing Islamic fundamentalism to go in and just kind of destabilize certain areas to then, westernize or whatever their in-game plan is. But that's just the proxy force that they use. It's not like a takeover, army or country, but like this.
No, that makes. Sorry, but that makes complete sense.
Well, this is what they did with the Mujahideen. The Mujahideen with the Soviets.
That's what I'm saying. That does happen. So that
the precedent has been set.
I'm thinking of so you have these what I would I try not to talk shit behind their back, but so intellectuals who try to put this in some kind of authoritarian or scholarly tone. And if that's the case, then they're trying to intellectualize and legitimize like continued colonization, essentially.
Who is doing that? I mean, I think the whole function of it is the whole function of empire is to expand empire.
Anybody with the whole Islamophobia pushing, the whole terroristic threat pushing. That's what I'm telling you. Like,
right.
Factually, it's not a threat.
No,
we have a lot of people that are talking about how much of a threat it is, and it's just not.
It's manufactured. I know, absolutely. It's in my opinion, it is a manufactured threat and has been for a very long time. It's been a very useful tool for what I call, whatever you want to call them, globalist, Illuminati, whatever the architects of what goes on in the world. It's been a very useful tool, and fear has, as you said, has played a huge role in that. And
now I definitely got to get off the phone with you because you just sit here and got this conspiracy in my head. Now I'm going to be thinking about how Islamophobia is really this gateway to continued colonization. On the surface, it certainly does look that way. Now I'm going to have to go through research.
Oh, man. Dude, I'm going to shoot, like I said, I'll shoot you a couple of Sibel Edmonds when you're just chilling or doing something. You got an hour, so just listen to her. Like I said, she's a former FBI whistleblower that got kicked out around 9/11 because she heard a lot of... Basically, she blew the lid, and you definitely have to go check this out now. She blew the lid off of the global trade of human beings, guns, drugs, and basically exporting terror. It's huge, man. The rabbit hole goes deep, my friend.
See, now you're back to, again, we just need to do this at a local city where I don't have to worry about the federal government or these bigger issues that you're bringing.
This is what I'm trying to do, baby.
Focus on our neighbor. You're narrowing me in. So I'm going to stick with the civilian-led model and no federalization, none of this crazy global shit. I'm just going to stick to making my town better.
That's what I'm talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, he's again gracious with his time, Mr. Michael A. Wood Jr., former Baltimore cop. Smart cat, man. He knows a little something about a little something. And again, man, I thank you for your time talking about, man, the tragic shooting, another shooting of Terrence Crutcher in Oklahoma. Again, man, as this kind of stuff goes down, and you also plug your podcast network that you have popping off. What is that about to go down?
Well, we'll push a lot more out of that when we're ready, but we're super close. But that's we decided on the name of Radio Revolver Media Group, and we'll have a bunch of Baltimore podcasts and different subjects coming up. Where one of our, like, my goal right now is, I think people have that snippet, right? So you can't do these long form podcasts. Like, I do a lot of these 2.5 hour podcasts where I'm trying to break down these nuances of things. People need 20 minutes, their ride to work.
Right.
So I'm working with a local lawyer and journalist, and we're trying to, our goal is to eventually get something every day where it's that 20 minutes to kind of break down a local issue, where we can do it quick and it's an in and out, not a long investment. That would be awesome.
Cool. Yeah, I definitely, some of the Joe Rogans, the 3 hours I can get into, but some of them just like, dude, how do you guys do that for 3.5 hours? It's insane. But cool, yeah, definitely.
I don't know either. I don't know how it happens. You're just talking, and then it's
I know. Yeah, time slips away. Again, man, thank you so much for your time, brother. Continued success, and I look forward to talking to you again, brother.
All right, be safe, man.
All right, you too. Mr. Michael A. Wood.